You guys ever heard of Where's Waldo? Well, apparently Waldo is here because this is Waldo Point Harbor. And the reason I came here is because this is a huge houseboat community and I've never done a video like this. I think it's going to be super cool to walk past all these different houseboats and show you how some of these people live here in Sausalito. And I mean, the idea of a houseboat sounds really cool, guys. I've never actually been on one before. Just the idea of like constantly being on the water like this is pretty neat. And I think the only thing I wouldn't like is maybe the constant rocking a little bit, but maybe they don't rock so much. Now, one thing I wanted to cover here, a lot of you guys have been mentioning in the comments, is wage theft. So what is wage theft? Basically, it's the fact that people are making more money, right? They're getting wage increases, but it's not enough to keep up with inflation. So essentially, people today are making less money than pre-pandemic, even though their salaries in dollar amounts is higher than it was a few years ago. So this is why inflation is basically the secret tax on everybody, or the silent tax, I shall say. It's not a big secret at all, but it silently sucks money out of your pocket, because even though you might be making more, you're actually making less because everything costs more. Here's some figures for you guys to digest. As of the second quarter for 2023, prices are up 15.8% since the beginning of 2021 for everything. This is just an average for goods across America, guys, but yet they're telling us inflation is at 3%, okay? And wages have only climbed 12.8%. So that is still a pretty big gap. We're talking 3% difference right there. And that 3% can really add up, especially over the years, and if things continue to get more expensive. So that's really the issue here. That's basically what wage theft is. It's that 3% gap that people are facing right now. Now, there's estimates that wages could catch up to where inflation is, especially if inflation slows down by the fourth quarter of 2024, but that's pretty funny because that's when Fannie Mae says we'll officially be in a recession by then. So I wouldn't be counting on that. And anything's possible, guys, but even if you're neck and neck with inflation and your wages went up just to meet inflation, really you want to be above inflation, because that's the only real way to get ahead in life. Just like I was telling you guys the other day, people that are spending half of their income on rent, the only real way to get ahead and get out of that situation, guys, isn't to lower your standard of living, because in many cases that's just not possible. You need to make more money. And that's why I think this is such an important topic to cover. Now, obviously, the Fed is having a major impact on what's going on with inflation and how much people are earning. Because the thing is, these rate increases that the Fed has been performing is likely to throw us into a recession by the end of next year, maybe even sooner. But that's kind of the prediction of where it's supposed to go from here. Once we actually do hit a recession, it will make inflation go down because people's spending power is down, but at the same time, it's going to make people's wage growth go down as well. So you can't win with this stuff. Now here we have a houseboat that is for sale, well actually pending now, and they were listed at $1,295,000. They sold it pretty quickly, listed it in June, and now it's almost sold. The last person bought it for $825,000, but here's the kicker that I don't really understand if somebody wants to explain this to me. This house is floating on water, right? So there's no land here, but somehow they have a $4,800 a year property tax bill. Someone want to explain how the government can justify charging you to park your boat on the water? Here lies in the real problem, right? The Fed is increasing interest rates to slow down inflation, which sort of seems to be working. Who knows where it's going to go from here now that it's starting to tick back up. But the other problem from them doing this is the fact that as they continue having higher interest rates for longer, and it's possible they're even going to raise rates again later this year, then this is going to have a continual slowdown effect on the economy. And that's what people need to understand, because as the economy continues to slow down, the less people are going to be earning. You're not going to be getting raises from companies if they're struggling to stay afloat themselves. So you see, it causes this, basically this doom loop, that the higher interest rates are for longer, the less people are likely to earn because it slows the economy down, and at the same time, if they lower rates, inflation will go back up. The Fed has basically placed themselves between a rock and a hard place right now. And here's the other thing. Part of the goal of the Fed with these interest rate hikes is they want people to make less money. They're trying to slow down the job market. They want less job openings. They want wage growth to slow down, which has a contributing factor to inflation. So they're actively trying to make it so that you make less money. At the same time, things cost more than ever. Go figure. Now they're saying that wages have kept up with inflation in certain industries, and I'll let you guys be the judge of that in the comments. They say that if you are in retail, leisure, and hospitality, and food service, you're actually ahead of the game right now. In all those industries, you have wages up 16%, 18.9%, and 19.6% since the beginning of 2021, compared to inflation that only put prices up 15.8%. But is it enough, guys? Like, the thing is, those are percentages, right? Those are the percentages that wages went up. But if you were only making 10 bucks an hour, I know most people make more than that, and it went up 18%, now you're making $11.80 an hour, right? So that's still not nearly enough. That's not a big enough increase to help you afford today's cost of living. So of course the percentages are going to be higher in these industries because they need to be. And they're saying that the industries that have actually fallen behind on wage growth are things like healthcare, social assistance, which is only up 13.9%, and you have the cost of goods and services up 15.8%. Even professional and business services, okay, those pay grades are up 12.8% over the same period from 2021 till now, but goods and services up 15.8%. So do the math. That's wage theft. People are losing money. Actually, one of the worst sectors that's getting hit right now is manufacturing, as their wages are only up 11.7% since the beginning of 2021. And then you have financial activities only up a measly 10.2%, guys. People who are in these lines of work are actually getting hit the hardest right now. That's why I was saying the other day, like, really the only way out of this is to make more money, which sucks because, you know, if you have to get a second job, means less time you can spend with your kids and your family, or less time just doing things that you want to do leisurely just to survive, you know. And I think that's why we see a lot of Americans moving overseas and going to different places, because the cost of living here has just become completely out of control. If you're in a good job, you're in a good industry, and you make a good salary, you can still make it here. Obviously, people are doing it, but it's getting tougher and tougher, guys. Now here's something I totally disagree with in this story, and they say that had the pandemic not occurred, wages would have gained ground against inflation, okay? Because they go on to say that wages grew about 1.4 to 1.5% more than inflation each year between 2013 and 2019. If that trajectory had continued, wages would have climbed 11.5% since February 2020, while prices would have increased 7%. Which is a 4.5% difference. So instead of wage theft, we would actually have wage growth without the pandemic. But the part I disagree with, it's not the pandemic that caused this issue to happen, guys. It's the fact that the Fed and our government decided it was a good idea to print $6 trillion in emergency spending, and half of it was squandered. We've covered this on the channel before. You literally had a couple $1 trillion that were stolen in PPP money, EIDL loans, money that we're never going to see again, money that was invested into real estate, that we see the real estate price is higher than ever, money that was used to buy other assets as well, that was pumped into the stock market. People bought different things with it that it wasn't meant to be spent on. It was meant to actually bolster the economy, but really it ended up just going into people's pockets, guys. And I hope the day of reckoning comes with that, because I covered a few months back how there have been some arrests made for fraudulent use of this money, but it's nowhere near the level that it needs to be, and it probably never will be, because we know that's how the government works. These guys just, everything is super slow and it's never enough. So I wouldn't be holding my breath for that. Now that we know that wage theft is a real thing and a lot of people are being hurt by this, how much money do people actually need to make to feel comfortable, guys? Well, Interestingly enough, there was a recent survey done on this. Right now you have 75% of Americans saying that they feel at least somewhat stressed out about their finances, which is not a good place to be in. I know that was one of the biggest concerns for me for a very long time, especially, the first half of my real estate career. I constantly was worried about if I was going to make enough money to be able to pay the bills, because when you're working on commission and you don't have any sort of salary coming in, it's a very tough gig, guys. Now, about 1/3 of people who answered this study say that they would need to earn between $50,000 and $100,000 a year to feel financially comfortable. 52% of Americans, though, say that they would require at least $100,000 a year to be financially comfortable, and 26% say that they would need a salary between $150,000 and $100,000. So you can see the vast majority of people still would like to have a higher salary than lower, and who wouldn't, right? But it's not about what you want, it's what you need to feel comfortable, was the idea of this study. Of course, what you can see from this is the vast majority of people want to have that six-figure income, not because they necessarily want it, but they need it to feel comfortable, because guess what? You can't buy the median price home today unless you make that six-figure income. One thing I think is super cool about all these houseboats is they are all completely different, guys. No cookie cutter homes here. As you can see, they all look completely different from each other. Different shapes, different sizes, different colors. Some of these places go for big money. I've seen some of these places for sale on Zillow, like in the $2 million range to buy a houseboat. So that seems pretty outrageous to me, because it's not like a real house. But hey, I guess if you really want to live this sort of lifestyle, then it might be worth it. But I don't know, it seems like a little expensive for what it is. Now, it shouldn't come as a huge surprise that the majority of young people between the ages of 18 and 34 said that they would be comfortable earning less than $100,000 a year. But only 17% say that they could live on less than $50K a year. And then when you get to the older generations, like people who are 65 and older, 49% say that they need to have $100,000 a year coming in to feel comfortable. And only 36% of people in that age group said that they would be comfortable making only $50,000 up to $100,000 a year. So that is an interesting point, because as you get older, life changes, right? You start picking up more expenses, you start getting a taste of what the good life is. And when you're younger, you can definitely live on less, because you just don't need as much to get by. You can have a small studio apartment. You don't need to have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. And you don't need to drive the newest car. You just need a place that gets you from point A to point B. But as we get older, lifestyle inflation starts to creep in. And once you've had a taste of the good life, whoever wants to go back, right? I mean, I can't blame them, Even me being here in California right now, getting a taste of the good life here in terms of the beautiful weather. It's going to be hard to go back to Florida, guys, because when I get back, even though it's going to be the end of October, it's still going to be hot. And I know it will be, because even on our luckiest years, it doesn't even start cooling down even by a little bit until Halloween. So I'm going to be completely spoiled being here, and right now it's like 70 degrees over here walking by the houseboats in Sausalito. But the group that actually needs the most salary is people who are between 35 to 64 years old. 59% of them said that they require a six-figure salary, and even 17% of them say that they need to be making at least $200,000 a year to feel comfortable, because they have children, they might even be taking care of their own parents, paying for assisted living facilities, hospice care, different things like that costs a fortune, and they're the ones who are paying for it. So obviously, when you're in this age group, it makes sense that you need to be in the highest income earning range. And one last interesting point from this study that I saw is people who currently earn $100,000 or more per year are more than likely than those who earn less to say they need to earn at least $200,000 a year to feel comfortable, And that's the American way, right? Like, we always want more. It's hard to go back to living a more modest lifestyle when you've had a taste of the good life, right? So I think everybody can kind of fall victim to that for the most part. If you start making a lot of money and you find ways to spend it too, then it can actually spell trouble for you. Now, earlier we were talking about the Fed and the interest rate hikes that they're performing, and this is really starting to have some effects on the real economy, guys. In August of 2023, there were 634 commercial Chapter 11 bankruptcy filings registered in the US, okay? And that is a 54% increase from last year, okay? Just 1 year ago in August of 2022. That is astounding. And the reason why this is happening is a direct result of the interest rate hikes, because as the Fed continues to hike rates, it makes borrowing for these companies next to impossible. It makes the current debt that they have when it comes time to refinance impossible. It makes it unaffordable. So all these companies, especially the zombie companies that basically don't make any money, are struggling the most from this right now. So you guys can see from this graph here just how much bankruptcies are ticking up this year versus last year, and it is a big difference. And what they're saying here is mid and small cap companies are in the most trouble compared to larger corporations. And I think this could be a main catalyst that we might see moving forward for the unemployment rate to go up. And it's not like I want people to become unemployed, guys. I'm just stating the facts here. This is something that's really happening right now, and that is the fact that the Fed is raising rates and it's putting companies in precarious positions where they're about to go under, and they're going to have to stop hiring, start firing, and possibly even go out of business altogether. So that is bad news for the future economy. Problem is this: we've had too low of interest rates and free money basically for too long, okay? And since we've had those policies in place for the last 15 years, basically since the last great financial crisis, that low interest rate environment and easy to borrow environment allowed these companies that were basically treading on thin ice to stay afloat because they could borrow money so cheaply. But now that that's not the case anymore, they are going to start going under. And as we can see, 634 of them filing bankruptcy just in 1 month. Imagine where things are going to be in another year from now, guys, because interest rates aren't going to be going down anytime soon. Jerome Powell said that in his recent Jackson Hole speech. Rates are going to have to remain higher for longer. Let's say they don't even do another interest rate hike this year. Doesn't matter, because interest rates will still be high next year regardless of that, and these companies are still going to be in the same precarious position that they are today. And guess what? This is so bad that it's estimated that about 37% of businesses right now are on the brink of going under because of these interest rate hikes. Imagine that. Imagine if 37% of businesses went out of business within the next 3 years. Do you think we'll be in a recession? Do you think the housing market's going to continue to go up in that situation? It's pretty common sense that it's not going to happen, guys. So I think this is just a ticking time bomb waiting to happen. And the thing is, no one can come to the rescue. The only thing that the Fed can do to prevent this from happening is to go back to QE and continue printing massive amounts of money. We think 6 trillion was a lot. That'll probably be nothing. Next time it'll be 12 trillion to try to bail us out of this problem, right? But guess what? What's the only problem with that? Oh, that one word, that silent tax on your wealth, inflation. You think wage theft is bad now? Imagine if they were to do that. You're not going to be able to afford anything, even if your salary doubled. Who cares if prices triple? So that's the point that I'm trying to make here in this video. And here's the worst part out of all of this. Let's say the Fed was to pivot tomorrow, right? Let's say that they did that. Things would not change because the damage is already being done to these companies. The longer that these interest rates are higher, then the more damage will continue to be done until it actually is reversed. So just imagine where things are going to be in a few years from now with this happening at the moment. And basically, this is how they end this story. They say, the recent sharp rise in rates really could cause a shocking rise in bankruptcies beyond all fears. So it seems like we're on our way to that. And it's not like I want that. It's not like, I'm sitting here, jumping up and down, hip, hip, hooray. But guess what? This is kind of a necessary thing that needs to happen because our economy is based on lies, guys. Everything is based on, borrow to the hilt and, have no responsibility in paying it back because let's just let inflation do our job for us and help pay back that debt. Well, the day of reckoning is obviously coming with this, as we can see from these amount of bankruptcy filings, and that's not going to be a viable tactic going into the future now that inflation has become a real problem. Now, I wanted to share one last interesting story with you guys that maybe you've heard, maybe you haven't, but this is the first time I've ever heard this, and it's kind of genius. It's regarding squatters. So basically a squatter is, let's say if I just broke into this houseboat right now and I moved my stuff in there and changed the locks, and I'm not the owner, I'm not supposed to be living there, I'm considered a squatter, okay? I'm not supposed to be living there, I'm living there illegally, but the law is kind of on your side as a squatter, unfortunately. But this guy here in California, who's a handyman, had this happen to his mother's house, and he was trying to find a way that, how do I get these people out? Because the law won't do anything, they're not on my side, so what should I do? Well, he combed through all of the different laws. So basically he determined the best way to handle this was to just switch places with them. Well, what do you mean, Michael? He decided to stake out the place, watch for when the squatters would actually leave the house, and then he entered the house himself and became the squatter. And then the law was on his side, okay? And that's effectively how he got the squatters out. Now, I'm not recommending anybody should do this, but it is an interesting way to look at how to kind of fight back against all these ridiculous policies that are in place, you know, things like that. They don't remove homeless from populated areas and downtown centers. They don't remove squatters from your house even though you own it and they're not even supposed to be there, but yet the law is on all these criminal sides, right? So these are ways that people can kind of fight back, but you got to have some balls to do this because it is dangerous, right? You never know what could potentially happen if you were to do something like that. But it's something to think about if you ever encounter a squatter problem in the future. You got an old car here. There's like all kinds of cool stuff in this area, guys. You got little sitting areas and parks, and I only took you guys through a fraction of this houseboat community because we've already gone on long enough. So maybe I'll come back another day and walk different sections of it because it is pretty cool. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next one to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.